Okay, I have a confession to make. I am the first speaker that doesn't have some kind of doctorate. But I have this really cool outfit. We've thrown a lot of numbers at you today. There's been a lot of statistics, a lot of very specific information. As Dr. X spoke to, I can't even begin to pronounce. What I can tell you is what we see. We have 19 school resource officers in the city of Colorado Springs, one at CC. I want to dispel the myth, first of all, about law enforcement in the school. This is just a disclaimer I have to get out. Our mission is not to arrest, okay? Our philosophy, our unit philosophy is what can we do to restore a safe, positive learning environment. We are mentors, we're teachers, we're parents. We do all those things at the school. All these SROs do these things daily. The student arrest or juvenile arrest numbers that you see, I want to caution that there may be a decrease in number. First of all, those contacts in general are during student contact days at school. So for obvious reasons, summertime, you're not going to have as many arrests, spring break, winter break, etc. Again, keeping in mind our mission is not to arrest necessarily, it's to restore. So if these juveniles are receiving a criminal summons on school campus for possession of marijuana consumption, which means they're under the influence, they have really done something stupid, because that generally doesn't happen. And these kids are very savvy. They understand. We spoke briefly about that. Dr. X said that these kids have really gotten good at hiding what they do. Before I came to speak to you, and I want you to understand that the SROs, the officers in the schools, they're really the subject matter experts, not me. I am just the recipient of all the data, the collection, if you will. And so I asked them in preparation for our symposium today, what anecdotally would you like for me to share with this professional audience? And I think what they mostly said, and they've become a little numb to it, which is kind of sad. There is such rampant use in the schools, and I don't mean to say that 90% of the kids are smoking weed, but when they have it happen, it's so strong. These kids come in from lunch break, and those kids that use before the medical marijuana, I think are probably still going to be those same kids that use. They come from families that are going to have those challenges, and so for that we see sameness. I think where the shift has been is in these kids that are kind of on the fence. You're with me? So these are kids who, are trying to seek support with how do they process, information regarding a big test or a big match, or, we've all been there. The adolescent brain, and I'm no expert, again, I'm just telling you what we see. The adolescent brain inherently has, a tendency towards risky behaviors. And so with this prevalence of marijuana in the field, those that were fence setters is kind of what I call a fence setter. Unfortunately, we're seeing jumping on the other side of the fence with the marijuana. And those are the ones we're seeing an increase in. Now, mind you, we don't want to arrest these kids. We want to rehab, we want to restore. And so we are putting forth much of our effort, and much of our time is spent in this restorative process, if that makes sense. I have given you some visual aids. These, I want you to understand these photos that I have set out for you. These are pictures that my SROs sent me this week. Okay? Photos they have of evidence. There's a couple of them that are a little bit older, but probably 90% of the photographs you are going to see when you wander about were events that occurred in the last week or two. I have one up here that's very telling. And I don't want to scare you because, again, I'm going to be honest with you, this is not necessarily the majority of these kids. But when these kids are so desensitized to think that on their lunch break, instead of like eating, and I will get through this week and I'm going to be respectful, instead of taking a break, hanging out with their friends, well, they're hanging out with their friends. What you're seeing here, and I've got more of them back there, these are selfies because they're proud. This is a 16-year-old female student smoking marijuana with alcohol, with a big bottle of alcohol between her legs. This is on campus, in the car. So, and we're not out there patrolling the parking lots. We do the best we can to deal with the safety that happens in schools. Every once in a while they do get caught. And that's what happened in this one, and there's more photos relating to that. But I want you to understand that these kids that are coming in here smoking this marijuana are all almost entirely being educated by what? The industry. More accurately, that's the battle we're all fighting. This is how they're educated. They will argue with me until they are blue in the face and telling me that it's okay, again, it's safe, repetitive again, it's natural. So these are our future megaphones. So we do our best to educate when we have them. They're a very captive audience for obvious reasons. So we had a case at an elementary school. Kid found a knife buried in the dirt, took it to school, and sold it at school, elementary school, sold it for marijuana. True story. We did not arrest this kid because, again, we're trying to work with him. He was 10. 10. That is an exception. That is not the rule. I'm not going to lie. More often what we see is the kids covertly using. I don't know that it causes such a disturbance in class because the kids that use and come back high after lunch, all the kids know. And so they sit in the back. They've got reports of the kids with their heads on their table, like this, sleeping through the whole rest of the day. And there's a number of kids that we see do that. I don't think this is a funny story, so I'm going to apologize for police humor. The chiefs are in the back going, oh, good Lord, what is she going to say? So we just had our drug dogs, and I'll say our drug dogs. CSPD doesn't do that. We don't deploy drug dogs at the schools. The schools will hire an outside agency to bring in their drug dogs. So can you imagine, just think for a minute, what happens at a school the minute a canine, narcotic canine, steps pause on campus? Right? What are they doing? They're telling everybody they know who smokes weed, dump it, flush it, throw it away, dump your backpack. And I actually have a photograph of one of them next to a safe detail card, which is kind of funny. I think the SRO thought that would be funny. Of a kid's weed that he or she, I don't know who it belonged to, put in a trash can when the canines came on campus. So these kids are smart. These kids know how to get around the system. You'll see in the photographs a cord out apple to smoke with. I mean, come on, how are we supposed to address that? We do the best we can. Fortunately, in some cases, or unfortunately, depending if you're the family member, they really like the selfies while they're doing it. So that's what you'll see up here. No, I'm not going to tell that one. When we ask the kids why, when we catch these kids, why? They're self-medicating. I have a big test coming up. I need to mellow. I've got to study. I've got to focus. So they're smoking weed to focus. they smoke marijuana instead of cigarettes, because cigarettes are bad for you. Did you all know that?
Yeah.
Right? Parents provide. I had one case where a student stole marijuana from his uncle, who had a card, a legal card, because he had pain. Stole the marijuana. And the uncle was mad, he wanted it back. So we had to give it back to him. Out of respect for the gastro noises that are happening for everybody in the group, I will stop talking and am available for questions now or later. Yes, sir.
Well, I did a lot of conversation about children. What about staff, teachers that are coming on campus, supervisors that are other day employees? What's in place?
And you had to go there. So you know how we talked about the canine drug sniffs that come on campus? I'm not going to rat out any particular school district because it's really unimportant. But I will tell you, we have made arrests of teachers on campus in the classroom possessing marijuana in their personal belongings. They got arrested.
Is there a policy in place by the school to keep, do they keep account like you're doing with the students? How many staff members are called or how many staff members are found to be under the influence even though the instructional period? Do we keep that type of account?
You know, I cannot speak to personnel with respect to the different school districts. I can tell you, obviously, we work in tandem as a partner with the schools. And so, very obviously, if there's that kind of an offense that happens or contact that happens, we work with the schools to address that issue. What they do with it.
So is there anyone available from the school district to answer that question? Do they track that?
I'm going to go ahead and say, since I don't work in human resources, I can't answer that question. I can tell you, and I will share that we had an incident, and the way I found out about the incident was from a phone call from a former student whose little sister attended a school and said, you need to see this. It got back to me, and I clicked on it because I have a Facebook account for these types of things. And a teacher was caught by the drug dogs. CSPD was called. The teacher was walked out. And by the end of the day, the kids already had a free this teacher, he's a hero, blah, 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 Facebook page. And it had 300 hits already. So it was an interesting situation. We have a policy, and like I said, I don't keep track of that myself, so I wouldn't know how many in a year.
Joe?
Probably for Dr. S. Are we seeing attrition rates? Are we seeing dropout go higher in Colorado?
I wouldn't know about Colorado across the board, but I can tell you from our district, we've put in a lot of prevention on dropout. And dropout is, we're coming to find that with some of our dropouts, there are so many factors that are contributing to it that pinning it down to that use would be pretty difficult at this point, again, because I can't tag the exact event to a student dropping. It's probably going to be quite a while. I think a couple of years of collecting data across the state equally, and that's why I think the state made a great decision by saying anything related to marijuana gets this tag. And I think you'll start to see some more studies come out with that.
Well, I have one more follow-up. Did you say in your presentation that there was an encouragement to not have such strict zero tolerance policies?
Yes.
Coming from?
The question was, is there an encouragement to not have zero tolerance policies? All across the board there is. And, we all heard stories and read the newspapers about, grilled cheese sandwiches being eaten in the shape, chewed into a shape of a gun, and then the school suspends the kid for 5 days. They should have suspended the administrator, if you ask me. But, you're not going to convince me that there isn't a need for some ratcheting down, so to speak. I do have that little bit of tradition in me. In fact, I think the reason why I didn't get in trouble with drugs in school is because of my father. And I knew that he would be so disappointed in me. And that's the sad thing that I probably see across the board more often than not. I call it guardian confusion. And the reason I call it that is because I see some wonderful single mothers that if I was that kid, I would be worried about the boot that's going you know where when I get home. But I have also seen grandparents raising their grandchildren because of mom and dad, and I always say, you've done this. And I look at the parent. I said, I'm not going to tell you how to parent, but it's time you start parenting. And those conversations get really sticky when the school official starts telling you. So, yes, sir.
So, as someone who works across the state, I want to thank both of you for, one, tracking and speaking out, because you should be applauded for speaking out, because across the state, we don't have that. I have somebody working in a metro school district said their school policy was that the kid smells like marijuana, just ask them to change their clothes. Or in another school in the north, that a student told me that the school notified them the drug dogs were coming. And so the question is, your advice, how do we engage and change the mentality to where we have more school districts comfortable tracking and speaking out about it?
I think obviously for some school districts it's going to be a bigger problem than it is for others. But I think that until we start to see real numbers and see things that happen, it's always going to be seen as, since we have to go on the identification of the behavior, if we don't ID the behavior and these numbers remain relatively small, then it won't get the attention it probably needs to get. I think if a school district, I can tell you one way you can get a lot of attention real quick is if a school district ratchets down and starts expelling every kid for drugs. That'll get a lot of attention across the state. It really will. And that would probably raise the discussion, maybe not so much in the positive. So I don't know. We're going to have more prevention programs. I know because the money's starting to come in. But it's a tough area to walk into. And when I started 6 years ago, even though the medical was there, it was much easier to have a conversation with parents. Now you're fighting that attitude as well. Yes, ma'am.
You said the key word, prevention. So, I listened to this and I think it's reaction. This is all reactive in terms of, what are we going to do with the students who are already using, et cetera, versus prevention. And when you talk of, like you just said with the explosion rates, if we have this attitude of, we'll just let them do it, that's not real prevention. So do you see any push in the school districts to fund prevention programs, or are they just still sweeping it under the carpet, not really doing anything? Because prevention it works, it's been proven to work, and I'm not seeing anyone in the system wanting to do prevention versus reaction.
Well, I think that, as I mentioned at the end, 14-215 was really good for us. And we're getting ready to finalize this week a prevention measure we're going to use and deploy out to our high schools. It's pretty much a long-term type of program that has had some success. And that's a step that we're taking. I don't oversee counselors and social workers, so I don't know what direction that they're going in. And as I had mentioned at the beginning, had they tied the sales tax to prevention intervention programs directly for schools, then we might be in a much better position than we're at.
And I can tell you, the school resource officers also do go into health classes, and we give both law-related education and alcohol and drug-related education as well. So we do the best we can. It's kind of hard for us to
There's
tell.
no funding for it. So it's like until we get the funding, it seems like we're going to be in this rat cage of it's constantly going around.
And to get that, it usually takes the attention. Yes, ma'am.
Well, talking about prevention, the Colorado Department of Public Health has recently funded 30 counties in Colorado and 40 communities, and there are competitive funds coming up to fund additionals to implement Communities That Care, a University of Washington community change system to prevent youth substance use as well as other health behavior problems, including truancy and dropout and teen pregnancy and violence. And if you're interested in seeing what that's about, just go to communitiesthatcare.net and you can find out more about the community change system, which is very proactive. It's not going to really affect the kids that are in high school using right now, but it's going to affect the future of Colorado.
Time for one more question.
What is District 11 one of the school districts that has approved medical marijuana on campus?
Our policy is good. I don't know if it has been approved by the board, since it has to deal with the administration of prescriptions. My department doesn't see that.
Okay.
But I know that it was there on the table, and that this year was the year that school districts better do something. And so
What kind of issues are you gonna? Is that gonna raise some new problems?
That's tough to say. I think that the students who have it prescribed, that number is so small. And I know that in our policy, it was tied very much to the administration of other drugs that were Control 1, Control 2, and Control 3. So it mirrors that pretty extensively.
Okay.
I don't think we'll see that. I mean, like I said, our biggest problem is going to be the 9th and 10th grader that leaves at lunch. So,
All right, thank you guys. I appreciate it.